He had white horses and ladies by the score, all dressed in satin and waiting by the door. Yes, welcome back to another one of those worst to best videos that I love to do. This is where I focus in on one artist or group and rate all of their albums from their worst to their best. As always with these, I am just going to give a very broad brush, surface level, bringing the album into context of why it's where it is, as opposed to diving in and giving a full-length album review. And as always, these are my own personal opinions. I'm not saying that the first one I'm going to be talking about is the absolute worst, even though it kind of is. And I'm not saying that the last one I'm going to be talking about is the absolute best. I'm just saying that if all their albums were laid out in front of me, which one would I listen to first, and which one would I listen to last? That's the basic general idea. So let's talk about Emerson, Lake and Palmer. They really exploded within the progressive rock scene and was doing things that other progressive rock bands at the time could only really dream of. And there were only three guys. Unlike Genesis, unlike Yes or King Crimson, which had a plethora of musicians to pull in, these were just three guys. These were the original Holy Trinity when it came to progressive rock music. Throughout their discography, they had some highs and they had some lows. So let's dive into the entirety of their run. And as always, there won't be any compilation albums and there won't be any live material. So it's only going to be studio releases featured on this list. So let's dive into, arguably, but I don't think anybody's really going to fight me for this one, their absolute worst album. Number 11, In the Hot Seat, released in 1994. Yeah, so this is how the band chose to go out. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. In the Hot Seat very easily is their worst work. There was just no fuel left in the tank. All of that drive, all of that energy is gone from the band. And I mean, it started off strong with the first track of In the Hand of Truth, which was fun. It had a little bit of the energy to it. But then, oh boy, it just peters out really, really fast. Really, about half the songs are 90s contemporary, adult contemporary singer-songwriter from Greg Lake. There's very little influence of Carl Palmer or Keith Emerson on here. And even with the added of ending off the album with Pictures at an Exhibition, it just, I don't know. Because Pictures at an Exhibition is such a strong interpretation of theirs that they've captured prior, having it here as a watered down best of kind of an idea, it just felt bland and not good. The only other track that I could say is somewhat good is One by One, and the entire time I'm listening to it, I'm like, this is a Les Mis ripoff. So yeah, I'm not even really sure what to think about this album at the end of the day. So yeah, let's go on to the next one. Number 10, Black Moon, released in 1992. Yeah, so this was the album that preceded In the Hot Seat. This was the second last album from them, and you can see that there's still a little bit of tank in the fuel, but they're starting to run out of fumes. There is a little bit more energy to this. There's a little bit more fun to it. Yeah, the Romeo and Juliet suite on here was really fun, and this was one of the reasons why I really liked Emerson, Lake and Palmer, was their ability to reinterpret these classical pieces in such a strange and mixed way. And the Romeo and Juliet it was okay. It was okay. It is one of the highlights on here. And the other one is Black Moon, the title track. Yeah, I mean, it still lacks that punch that I was really hoping for. The jam sessions are obviously gone, and there are a lot of melodramatic and really almost cringeworthy songs from Greg Lake on here. Farewell to Arms, Affairs of the Heart, Burning Bridges, they're all... The best word that I can describe these are really lame. And yeah, I mean, these guys hadn't really come together officially, the three of them, in almost 15 years, and to see that this was the album that brought them back onto the stage, yeah, let's move on. Number 9, Love Beach, released in 1978. Alright, so y'all know already how I feel about Love Beach. I did a full-length album review of this album, and I went back to listen to it for this in preparation to see if there was anything that kind of stood out, came about a little bit more. Everything that I pretty much said about the previous albums that I've already talked about can pretty much be applied here. The only thing that puts it above that is the Memoirs of a Gentleman. That second side, that one's not bad. It puts it above, like streets above, the other albums. All the other tracks are really like uninteresting. The passion seems to be gone in it. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of energy within it. The only ones that I kind of liked was Canario was kind of fun from the first side. And I mean, at the end of the day, this album was a contractual obligation. Like, even the boys didn't really want to record it. They essentially just went to a beach and decided to have a vacation, and whatever they wrote, they wrote. And I think that's the best way to put this album. It's just bleh. So let's move on. Number 8, Emerson, Lake and Powell, released in 1986. So not a whole lot of people would kind of label this as an Emerson, Lake and Palmer, seeing as Carl Palmer isn't actually found on this album. He's replaced by Powell. So I mean, the last names are pretty similar. I decided to keep it on here because inevitably somebody would have asked, well, where's Emerson, Lake and Powell? So here it is. It's at the number 8th spot. Because this was released in the mid to late 80s, it definitely showed where Black Moon and In the Hot Seat were going to go, because this sounds very, very similar to those other two. It does have some really standout tracks, highlighting definitely Mars, the Bringer of War. Again, they're taking that Mars suite from the planets and putting it straight on here, and what they do with this is kind of fun. It is just a replaying instead of a reinterpretation of it. But the one that I loved was Locomotion. When it started playing the Locomotion, and this is when they took the Locomotion, the song that da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na, come on baby, do the locomotion. They just took that and they redid it themselves. And again, this was another facet of the band that I really liked. Taking those like ragtime fun, like that old-timey Western bar, and just bringing in the fun, and this was definitely that fun interpretation. Another thing is that the album does start off pretty strong in that the first 4 or 5 tracks kind of bleed into one another, kind of providing a really great listen to all the way through. And yeah, it's a lot more fun. You can feel a little bit more of the energy back in, but the album does lack that raw energy and kind of sophistication and originality that we had from the 70s. Lay Down Your Guns, one of the more lame tracks on the album, feels like it's the beginning of The Beauty and the Beast, and a few other of the singer-songwriter songs don't quite hit the mark as well as I think the band wanted them to. And yeah, I mean, it's not a bad album, but it's not anywhere near their best. So let's move on. Number 7, Works, Volume 2, released in 1977. I was debating whether or not to include Works Volume 1 and 2 as one single piece, but I decided to break them up because they are 2 separate releases. And I put Volume 2 as being a weaker album than Volume 1, because we haven't talked about Volume 1 yet, only because this is the poster child for a mixed grab bag of music. It is kind of the weirdest album that they released, because like each artist kind of tackles their own songs on here, and at this point in the group's career they were kind of suffering a little bit from an egomania epidemic. Like, each one was just like, no, this is my song, you can't touch it, don't tell me what to do with my song, this is my song, don't touch it. The only songs that really stand out here, because it is such a mixed grab bag, some songs really work, some songs don't. And you can definitely see which ones are whose. I Believe in Father Christmas definitely being a highlight. I listen to this every year at Christmas. You can't not. Brain Salad Surgery is also kind of fun, and the Maple Leaf Ragtag, the Honky Tonk Train Blues, these two being that ragtag, kind of that fun aspect that I know that the boys love to bring. Because that, again, I just love when the boys have fun. And when they're having fun, I'm having fun, we're all having fun. It's a great time. The one thing that I will say, though, is that it is blissfully short. That's a win. I mean, when an album is getting praised because it's short, meh. But I think the reason why this album got so high on the list in comparison to the ones that I've already talked about are those songs that when they hit, they hit. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is a mess. So let's move on. Number 6, Works Volume 1, released in 1977. Okay, so now I can actually talk a little bit more about this whole Works endeavor. So Works Volume 1 I like a little bit more, mainly just because of side 4. And this is one of the few pieces that needs to be listened to on vinyl to really get an idea of what's going on here. Each artist, each band member had control of one side. So the first side was all of Keith Emerson. He wrote this whole piano concerto, and the best way to sum that up is just, yep, it's music. It's music. There are a few points that are really good in that whole long stretch of music, but it's also a slog to get through. There's a lot of wandering around where there's no real like grounding. The themes don't really interconnect very, very well. And then, the second side being all Greg Lake with all of his songs. I really like C'est La Vie and I really like that last track, but the whole thing seems a little melodramatic. Quite honestly, I love Carl Palmer stuff. Like his stuff where he incorporates the orchestra with a lot of his drumming styles. Really great work. Like it's the only one that doesn't feel like he's doing this almost out of spite. I'm not saying that the other two are doing it out of spite, but it does feel a little bit like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it my way. He's the one that's like, all right, well, I guess I'll just do it this way then. But easily, the reason why this one got so high was the last side. Only 2 tracks, and it's when the boys are coming together as a team to play together properly. And this is when, like, if there was a teacher or a parent or somebody that's like watching these guys fight, they're like, guys, we're coming together, you're sitting in the sandbox, you're going to play with your toys, you're going to play together nicely. And that's when they came out with Fanfare for the Common Man, that reinterpretation, and they were using pieces that they used to play live within jam sessions at the beginning of the career and just letting that play. And Pirates. Damn, I love Pirates. I love Pirates so much. It's so much fun. So much fun. For now, I'm going to leave it there, and we're going to move on to number 5. Number 5, Tarkus, released in 1971. So now we're getting into the, I almost said the good stuff. This is when we're coming into like the crust. This is when we're coming into the masterpieces. This is Emerson, Lake and Palmer at their high day, and Tarkus is an interesting album. I love that first side, the title track of Tarkus. Really, really great stuff. Like they took what they took from the first album and just exploded it. Holy jeez. To this day, it still knocks me out. Even though not every point on the song works, and this really showed the world what prog could do. The only thing was the second side. The second side does waver a little bit, and it's definitely the weaker part of the album. It's probably actually the weakest material that they wrote pre-Works. Bitches Crystal is all right, and Are You Ready, Eddie is fun. But the other stuff that's found on Tarkus is a little bit hit and miss. So, I mean, Tarkus title track, brilliant, loved it. Second side, a little bit of a wandering. I think they were still kind of getting their feet of like how to handle these more smaller pieces. And yeah, I think that's all I've got really to say about Tarkus. So let's move on to number 4. Number 4, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, their self-titled debut album released in 1970. This one definitely took the world by storm. Holy jeez. A lot of people rate this as their best work, and I can definitely see it. It has that energy. It has that chaos. It has that just pompous, bombastic, we're going to do it and we don't care kind of an attitude to it. I love that. And it took that classical approach that those early 20th century composers, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, took those ideas and just like, bleh, loved it. Whenever you're doing an experimentation like this and kind of just throwing everything on the wall and seeing what sticks, not everything is going to stick. And with a debut album such as this, it hit strong. Like it instead of throwing it at the wall, they shotgunned it at the wall, but not everything landed well. There are a few moments on here that I think don't quite hit me as hard as some of the other stuff does. And it's odd because the ones that I love Tank. I love Lucky Man. Lucky Man is probably one of my favorite ballads that Greg has written. Ooh, what a lucky man. Lucky man he was. And I love Knife's Edge. And it's odd that Knife's Edge was kind of an afterthought from the band after they realized that the album was too short. They're like, all right, well, we'll figure something out and put a nice edge on there. So yeah, it's a great piece, one that I think really kind of shotgunned them into this progressive rock movement, and really set the stage for what we were going to expect. But because this album is so sharp, I think is a good adjective for this album. It's so sharp, and they learned to polish that off because there's a lot of raw material on here, and in some ways that works as an album overhaul, but I think keeping it a little bit more polished served them in the end with some of the better albums that I'm going to be talking about. So before I talk about number 3, number 2, and number 1, these last 3 albums, it was really hard to suss out. At the end of the day, I really had to sit down and be like, if I had these 3 albums in front of me, which one would I go for first? Which one would I go for second? And which one would I go for third? So let's talk about number 3.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend.
Number 3, Brain Salad Surgery, released in 1973. So this was why I needed a little bit of a preface just before I talked about this. In some respects, this is the absolute best material that Emerson, Lake and Palmer have put out, and a lot of people would agree to that. It is the most cohesive, it is the most unifying, it's got the strongest identity out of all the albums that the group has written. Starting off with the classical hymn of Jerusalem, going right into Toccata, which is an interpretation of another artist's work that just, it is a reimagining of it. And then we have that giant Carnival number 9 suite that takes up a side and a bit. Like, it starts off at the end of side 1 and then continues on into side 2 with impressions 1, 2, and 3. So I need to talk about why I put it third. Even though this is an album that I regularly go to when I'm feeling like a pick-me-up, like I need something just to help me through a day, this album is a commitment. And if you're not ready to commit to the album, it's going to be hard to digest some of the denser pieces, especially Carnival number 9, movements 3 and 2. 2 is just Keith Emerson on the piano just doing his thing. Like, this is probably his best work. But if you're not really in the mood for that, you're going to be left at the wayside, and it's not going to be pretty. Same with movement number 3. Movement number 3, it takes some getting used to. It kind of goes all over the place and really explores the territory. It does so in a good way, and I'm along for the ride for the most part, but there are some days where I'm just like, I can't follow the band here. And I think that's what kind of put it over, because it's so much of a commitment. You really got to be ready for it. Same with Toccata. Like, I love Toccata, but again, if you're not ready for it, it's gonna tear you apart. It's just gonna beat you to a pulp. And in some ways, I love that. I love it. But if I'm not ready for it, I'm not ready for it. And yeah, I think that's about it. Still, You Turn Me On and Benny the Bouncer are delightful little tracks, and I love those two. It feels like they really solidified, especially Benny the Bouncer. I love Benny the Bouncer. And Still You Turn Me On, like, it tackles all the facets that I love about the band, and I think that they're, at this point, they know exactly who they want to be. Okay, so that's enough about Brain Salad Surgery. Let's move on to number 2. Number 2, Trilogy, released in 1972. All right, so I can see a lot of people being like, why did he put Trilogy above that? The difference between Brain Salad Surgery and Trilogy, like, the two are like so close, and there was a part of me that wanted to put Trilogy at number 3 just to have the 3 and 3, but the two are like so close, and you have to almost use a microscope to see where one was better than the other in my mind. And at the end of the day, I can be in any mood to listen to Trilogy. Anytime I could listen to Trilogy and love it. Absolutely love it. Hoedown, Endless Enigma, and Trilogy, these 3 tracks are so friggin' good. So good. I love Trilogy, the title track, just for what it does. Like, it starts off very somber with the main piano piece, and then it just builds, and then it builds, and then it explodes. It's so well crafted and so well polished as well. That is really why I love it. It's less of a jam session and more of a well-polished, thought-out piece. And I think that's what puts it above it. Same with Endless Enigma. Like, Endless Enigma is more of a jam session, and there's also a lot less of a weakness on this album. There's no low points. In my mind, this is the best studio release that the bands have done. So I think that's about it. That's all their studio releases. But it's not my favorite work from them. So I'm playing a little bit against my own rules, and I'm including a live album for their number one. So you guys probably already know what it is, so let's just talk about it. Number one, Pictures at an Exhibition, released in 1971. Yep. Love this. Love this album. It's a reinterpretation of the very classical work of Pictures at an Exhibition. Like, progressive rock at this point had to have been listened to live. If you're looking through all the other progressive rock acts at the time, the real way to appreciate them is to appreciate them live. Pictures at an Exhibition does that. They go through every single facet of the band that I love. The tight musicianship, the talented compositions, the reinterpretations of already established classical pieces, jam sessions that just go completely off the map. Keith Emerson beating the living snot out of an organ, like holy, if you saw this guy live, he just is relentless with that organ. He's just like, and at the end, they have a blast with the Nutcracker Suite. Just that fun ragtag fun times. It's what made me fall in love with Emerson, Lake and Palmer to such an extent. So that's why Pictures at an Exhibition is number one for me. It's one that I can listen to anytime. I listen to it countlessly, and I just love it. Love it, love it, love it. So that's about it. That's all of the albums from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, rated from worst to best, in my opinion. What did you guys think? What is your list of Emerson, Lake and Palmer albums? Which one is your favorite one? Which one is your least favorite one? Let me know of all of those by commenting down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out. He's a man, and he's lucky, 'cause he's a lucky man. Ooh, he's a lucky man. And he was, 'cause he's dead. Yeah, he's dead. Oh, he did. The guy's so dead. Yeah.